Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I am about to start working up an accuracy load for the Thompson Center Compass in 6.5 Creedmoor. But before I do that, I want to pay a little bit more attention to the trigger. Now, the trigger on it, I'll show you that it is unloaded, take the magazine out. The trigger on it right now is not terrible. It is perfectly serviceable for hunting. From the measurements I've seen, it comes in at around 5 pounds. But when shooting from the bench, it just feels like it takes all kinds of pressure before it breaks. And it's really not terrible, but what we're going to do today is make it a little easier for me to shoot tight groups from the bench. So, I have ordered a spring kit from M Carbo. Let me pull this apart and I'll show you what we have here. We have in this package our sear spring, our main trigger return spring, and our secondary trigger return spring. Now, this gun did go through a recall, I believe, in 2016. This gun was purchased in 2019. It shouldn't have that problem, but we'll see once we get it apart and check. This kit came with 2 trigger return springs, and thankfully they are clearly labeled hunting and bench rest shooting. This is the bench rest one. I believe is the one that gets the trigger weight down to 1.5 pounds, and this is more like 3.5 pounds, if I remember correctly from their website. This spring kit did cost $20 with $6 shipping. Now, if you ask me, $6 shipping for these little tiny springs, 1/4 inch in diameter, is a little bit steep, especially when you're charging 20 bucks for the springs, but if it makes the trigger weight better, then I think it'll be worth it. So, the first step to putting this together is to take the barrel action out of the stock. So we're going to do that now. Alright, we've got them apart, and let me set the stock aside, and we're going to take a look at this action here. So first, let's go ahead and take the bolt out and get that out of the way. I'll set that over in parts tray over here, and we do have the updated version. Let me give you a little bit closer look. Alright, so here is the trigger assembly up a little bit closer. The change that they made was to make this a little more drop safe from what I've read, and they added this piece here, which is a counterweight and then a secondary trigger return spring. So this is the updated version, and we will go ahead and take this apart and take a look at putting the M Carbo spring kit into it. I believe the first thing to do here is to knock out this pin right here that holds the trigger itself in place. And I'll just push that straight through with a 1/16 punch. And it comes out the other side. I'll put this in my parts tray over here. And I'll carefully pull that out. And you can see that that trigger comes out of there just like so. Now, I don't want to lose these parts in case I want to put them back in. So I'm going to take the main trigger return spring and the secondary trigger return spring and put those aside into our tray. This right here is the over travel adjustment. And with this main trigger return spring and the nuts on the over travel adjustment screw, this can be adjusted from the factory down to the trigger pull weight that we had it at. Now, I had it all the way down to its lowest setting, and we were still a little too heavy for comfortable shooting off the bench. The M Carbo set requires that you take off these 2 nuts, and they basically go away. Now, I already have my trigger over travel set with this screw, so I'm not going to mess with this nut right here. I'm just going to take this off. Okay, so let me get a little tiny wrench, and if I can remember the size here, I believe it's a 1/4 inch. Yes. 1/4 inch wrench fits it just fine, and I'm going to loosen both of these. And again, I'll save these in case I ever want to put the stock trigger springs back on, which I very well may do come hunting season. Okay, this is actually on there pretty snug. And since I already have it set, I'm not going to even worry about Loctiting that at all. We're just going to leave it just like it is. Okay, the next part that has to come apart is another little pin right here. And you can see the counterweight system that they have right here. Let me wipe off some of that excess oil. And the sear itself are both held in by this same pin. So let's go ahead and punch that pin out and pull it out the other side. That came out real easy. And those just fall right out. And there's the sear spring. Well, that was easy enough. I'm just going to try to keep these in orientation so that I don't mix it up at all. Now, both of the pins in the whole trigger assembly are exactly the same, and both of the action screws are the same. So you don't have to worry about getting those confused, which is a nice thing. So here are our sear spring and secondary trigger return spring. I'm going to pop out that sear spring first, and we'll get this put back together with the aftermarket spring. This is a little bit more difficult to do with the scope on. I could have taken it off, but it's already sighted in, and that would be a little bit of a hassle. So I'm just going to stick that pin in from that side to hold the counterweight in place, and then I'll slip in the sear. Line that up and push the pin through. And I'll just give a little bit of push with the punch and get that lined up, and that is perfect right there. Now I'm going to take our bench rest shooting trigger return spring and we'll put that on. And that goes right on there with no nuts on. Then there is a recess. Not sure how well you're going to be able to see it on camera. Let me get it up a little closer there. There we go. There's a recess right there that the secondary trigger return spring is going to go into. So I'm going to very carefully, it's a little tiny guy, I'm going to very carefully dump it out of this pouch into my hand. Little tiny guy. And let me see if I can feel any difference between this one and the factory one. Yeah, there definitely is a difference. The M Carbo spring, even on that secondary trigger return spring, is a lot lighter. So I'm just going to stick it in there, and there is a little grease already in that recess that's going to hold it in place for me. And we can finagle that trigger back in there. Now that's kind of a problem I thought I would have. Let me see if I can get you up close. All right, when I went to slide this in, the secondary trigger return spring bent over to the side. So I'm going to try to get this back out of here without losing that. And let me try this a little bit different way. Let me hang on to that for a second, because I can always slip that back on afterwards. let's try it just like this. Okay, and that seemed to work. Just had to figure out a little bit different way of sliding that all together. And that seems to have worked fine. So I'll grab our main trigger return spring. And get it in its recess. And I'm going to have everything held together here. And then slide in the pin then I'll flip this up and slide in the pin from the other side. And I just got to figure out how to line that hole up. Tell you what I'll do, this is a trick I use all the time. Because I can see, I'll use my punch to get it lined up from the start. Then I'll flip it over and kind of use a push-pull method and push the punch back out with my pin, and there it went. Perfect. And I'll even it up there. Okay, let's slip the bolt back in and we'll give it a quick function test. Yeah, I picked up a little bit of debris on my bolt in that tray, so I'll just wipe that off. And we'll slip the bolt back in and give it a try. Okay, that was much lighter, I can tell already. No over travel. Let's give it one more try, and then we'll put the stock back on so that we can tell for sure. Okay, it does feel like it has a longer travel, but I'm thinking that's just because it's lighter, so that I can actually feel the whole travel length. We'll recock the action and put it back into the stock. And just a little bit of tug on there for now. All right, let's get this up and see how it feels. Oh, that's much lighter. Just a little bit of pressure on there and it goes off. It doesn't feel quite as light as my Savage, but I'm gonna actually have to get it on the bench and do some shooting with it to figure it out for sure. It's a little more pressure than I would like, but not bad at all. And I'm not feeling that travel as much as I thought I would. Not bad at all. I'm gonna be happy with that for now. All right, well, thank y'all for watching. We're going to be doing some load workup with this gun very soon, probably in the next video that you guys will see. And I will give you a full report of how this trigger does out on the range, and we'll talk about that more later. For now, thank y'all for watching, and have a good one.